Welcome into the Pittsburgh Steelers Dynasty review. We're looking at the Steelers from 2023 and beyond. They snuck into the playoffs. Mike Tomlin did it again. They finished 10-7 somehow, even though they had a negative point differential, I'm pretty sure. And would you say Pickett threw 5 touchdowns? I know he wasn't their starter all year, but 6 touchdowns. Brian, Steelers. Is it positive? Should we have a positive outlook here?
I don't think so. I don't know what there's to be excited about. I remember harassing Dad with that going into the 23 season where he's like, he kept naming Kenny Pickett. He's like, well, I got this guy. This guy was talking about his quarterbacks. I don't even remember who exactly it was, but it was like, and I got Pickett, and it's like, I don't know. It's some of that, like, well, he's on my team, so I'm like a little biased towards him kind of a thing. Because I was like, he just had such a bad rookie year, which, we can kind of like say like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. He was a rookie, but it's like you said, like the team was doing well in spite of him, this past year. Not great quarterback play by any stretch. So I think it's just, there's not a whole lot to say.
Yeah, and on top of that with Pickett, he was the first quarterback taken in 2022. It was at pick 20. So all those teams that were picking at the top that theoretically needed a quarterback didn't take one. Didn't take Pickett. So
yeah, and guess where they're drafting again this year.
Right, I know. So yeah, the Steelers 10-7. Mike Tomlin is going to be the head coach at least one more year. Cap space. They are under in the hole, $14 million, so that's 26th best or worst, however you want to look at it. They have basically all their draft picks plus the Rams 4th, so 8 draft picks, I believe. So they can do something there. Free agents, only one really to talk about is Mason Rudolph, who took over as the quarterback there at the end and looked good compared to Trubisky and Pickett, but I guess we can start there with the quarterbacks. Let's start with Kenny Pickett. Is there any hope? Is there any hope that he can turn into something, or is it just like this is a backup on our hands? Like maybe hold him just because you invested potentially a first-round pick or a high second in him, but don't expect much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's a hold in the sense where it's like, are they going to, like, he'll probably be the starter next year for an NFL team, at least for some of it, It's like, I think the real question is, like, because he's basically valued at, like, a mid-third round pick, it's kind of like, would you rather have the third round pick or Kenny Pickett, Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm kind of leaning towards the pick.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't like him coming out of college, and I should say because, this is super flex that we're approaching this from, and I need to say that because someone left a comment because we talk a lot about in half PPR, and he told me that no one plays half PPR, and I'm talking to the wind, so I do need to lay out what we're talking about here because there's probably a lot of people that don't play super flex. Obviously, in one quarterback's pick, it's a waiver wire guy.
Oh,
so
yeah, for sure. Wait, someone said no one plays half PPR?
Yeah, and that I'm talking to the wind. So apparently we're the only people to play half PPR. So although I think the fantasy footballers, all their stuff's based in half PPR as well, which is the biggest fantasy football podcast in the world, essentially. So
yeah, don't plug those guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Right?
No, I love those guys. They're funny.
Yeah.
Very insightful for sure.
Yeah, and half PPR is a good middle ground because there are people that play standard as well. So
yeah, for sure. I thought half PPR would be the most popular format, but maybe we're the assholes. I don't know.
No, I think PPR is only because there was no half PPR there for a while when PPR first came on the scene. Like half PPR wasn't a thing, so it's just one of those cases like where it came first, so it's going to be probably slightly more played, I guess. But anyways, I'm talking to the wind. We're talking to the wind.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, Pickett, I don't know. There's not a lot of hope. And another thing on him is, they said, oh, he's the quarterback of the future. but they benched him. Even I know he got hurt, but he was healthy for the playoff run, and they didn't. And they started Mason Rudolph. That tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah,
Tells you
for
everything.
sure.
So
Yeah, I mean, and even if you like extrapolate like his 17 game pace and everything like that, it's like it's basically 3,000 passing yards and 9-10 touchdowns. With I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there's anything there.
No, I don't think so either. Maybe if he runs a little bit, but I don't know. He can move for sure, but not this amazing runner. I guess Mason Rudolph, he's a free agent. Like, are you just holding him for now? Or Mitchell Trubisky, like any of these guys? None of them, either of like. What are you doing with Rudolph and Trubisky?
I think I'd be more inclined to hold Trubisky just because we've seen it a little more from him. Even though, did he get hurt or did he get benched?
I think he got benched.
For Rudolph. Okay. Yeah, I don't think either one is a hold, honestly. Like, I think just toss them to the wind, and even if they are the start, like I don't know. I was gonna say even if they are the starters for the Steelers, do you really care? But I don't really care about who the starter for the Steelers is now that I talk about it more. But starters for an NFL team are always like quarterback wise and super flex, like they have to be rostered. But I don't know, man.
For sure.
I don't think these guys hold any kind of value.
No, I would hold Rudolph just to see if they do re-sign him and he has the potential to be their guy. We didn't mention it, but Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator here. I think they try and bring in a quarterback here, whether it's a Justin Fields, whether it's a Russell Wilson, a Ryan Tannehill reunites with Arthur Smith, and I know a lot of people hate Arthur Smith. He was pretty good for Tennessee there. Obviously, he got a head coaching job because of it. But I think twice in his 3 or 4 years, they were like top 5 in yards per play, which is always a good measure of how good an offense is. And they were like 4th, I think, in 2 of the 3 or 2 of the 4 years he was there. So he's done some good things for sure. So, what if they get Tannehill in here and he just kind of steadies the ship? Or, again, Russell Wilson would be a little more exciting. Justin Fields would be really exciting. So I hope they go that way with the quarterback position, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously like what's lacking there, like they have good enough wide receivers. They have good enough running backs. Their defense is good. Their tight end in Freiermuth is like, he's not like a stud, but he's definitely good enough, they should be better than they are, kind of a thing, even though it's kind of funny that because they did make it to the playoffs. But did we ever really think they had any kind of shot to go anywhere in the playoffs, or they were just like that team where you just knew where they were just going to lose,
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I was just pulling up the running back rankings and keep trade cut. Their default is Superflex half PPR, just so you know. So someone else plays
burn.
Right. Yeah. So onto the running backs. I think there's actually some optimism here about Najee Harris in particular because Arthur Smith is the guy. We saw what he did with Derrick Henry. We saw what he did with Algier his first year, made him a 1,000-yard rusher. Usually his offenses can run the ball. Now, I know we were slightly disappointed with Bijan because we wanted to see him use him more. So if he kind of takes the Derrick Henry approach with Najee Harris, I'm kind of excited about him, like with Arthur Smith, in terms of like, and we've seen stretches from Najee Harris both the last 2 years where his second half of the season, his week 10 on, like he's like a top 10 running back. So where are you at, Najee Harris? I know people really don't like to talk about him or, bad taste in their mouth, but do you think he could be a top 15 running back next year? Would that be crazy?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. Wait. Yeah, I kind of answered that kind of weird. I guess you kind of asked it kind of weird. Yes, I do think he can be a top 15 guy. Like it's going to mostly be like volume based, but we've seen it from the Steelers like year over year. Like that's kind of what they do, even though he was playing, a little more than half the snaps, like he's like kind of like in a 60-40 timeshare with Jaylen Warren, he was less involved in the passing game and everything like that this year, but he still had enough, like he wasn't like a stud like he was his first year, but his rookie year back in 2021, but he was all alone at that time, and it's like I don't think he ever gets back to that. Like, I don't think he's going to have a 1,500-yard season, but I don't think you necessarily need that in order to be, kind of a low-end number 2 guy. Like, it's going to be all volume-based for sure, but I think it's safe to say that he will have it. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, and, Steelers, this is what they're going to want to do if they don't have a quarterback, which they don't right now, is run the hell out of the ball. So they're not going to go away from Najee Harris. They're not. So I think he's kind of, without an injury, of course, I think he's almost he's pretty close to like as much of a lock for top 15, in my opinion, as you can get.
It's kind of crazy that Jaylen Warren, and this is after moving up 6 spots. I don't know how far back they go. Najee Harris moved up 6 spots and Warren moved up 2 to be 1 spot behind Warren. Like, I just don't think that's necessarily like justifiable given that what we just saw during the season. I do think Jaylen Warren looked better than Najee. So there's that, and they actually had pretty similar stats, which I'm actually a little surprised from because it didn't necessarily feel that way. Maybe because Najee finished stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, like I said, like Warren looked more explosive and stuff like that, but I don't, wow, Najee's 242. That's
he's
big dude.
Looks like it too. Runs like it for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that's really justifiable, like, to have Warren right like 1 spot in front of Najee. I guess it's kind of hard to argue, like, why not kind of a thing, but yeah, I don't know. There's definitely some guys in front of Najee that I'd rather have, just in general, like, only a couple of spots. So it's like, I don't know. It's a little nitpicky, I guess. So.
Yeah, we actually kind of talked a little bit about it. I forget when, maybe when we were talking about Tajay Spears, but like Jaylen Warren, he's kind of ranked where he's at. I know he flashed last year and stuff like that, but he was, he's RB25 overall, and he played every game, so it's nothing to write home about. So like he's kind of only here because we want him to be better than Najee, and not because. Or we want the Steelers to use him more than Najee, not because they are going to. Kind of like Tajay Spears being at RB14. That's more because we expect it to happen or we want it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. I want mixed. The guys below him. Like, I'll take Pollard, I'll take Kamara, I'll take Mixon over sure. Jaylen Warren. So no questions there. So, and again, Arthur Smith. I know he kind of did use Algier quite a bit last year, but generally it was kind of one guy that was there. Derrick Henry, Algier his first year, Bijan for at least the second half of this last year. So I think it's going to be mostly Najee Harris, and for that reason, I'm excited. Surprisingly,
yeah, I know, right? It is worth mentioning. Like, I'm trying to do a little mental math here. He did have like 1,150 total yards, 60 catches. Jaylen Warren did, so it's not completely unwarranted necessarily, but it's like, I don't know, like, yeah, it doesn't seem right for sure.
And that's like, to me, that's ultimate best case scenario, of course, unless Najee gets hurt. So no one else really. No one else on the running back room to talk about. The wide receivers are always going to be a little interesting. Deontay Johnson is, considered the RB1. Kind of a down year from him. Some injuries in there and stuff. Where are you at with Deontay, who's listed as wide receiver 39? I think he's kind of I don't know. Is he a buy? Like, do you want to give a second round pick for Deontay, like a mid to early? Or anything, but would you do a late second round pick? Like, what would you do for Deontay?
I think if your wide receiver room's like really deficient. Like, I think he's a totally fine startable guy. I think a high second. I don't know if I don't think I would do that necessarily, but just because like Deontay's not one of those guys that he's going to push your team over. He's a good depth piece for sure. He's definitely startable. But he's not going to be the dude that like turns it around for your team kind of. So if you have an early second, that means your team, most likely it means your team is bad. And it's like, no, I don't think you want the 27-year-old like possession guy with no quarterback basically as of right now. And I don't really see that changing, like we said. So not that he necessarily needs a good quarterback though, because we've seen him be productive in general, you know, like he is going to get the targets and stuff. He doesn't have the ceiling that you'd want. Like, it's just not the way to play necessarily. So, I mean, I like him as a player. Like, he gets those targets because, you know, he's good at getting open quickly, you know, which is a nice little safety valve for bad quarterbacks, which is basically all he's played with besides Roethlisberger. God, that seems like so long ago.
I know it does.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. He has had some bad quarterbacks. The shell of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
Rudolph, Trubisky, Pickett. He's tough.
I look at him as like basically a mid-range wide receiver 3, and I think he can definitely outperform that based on pure volume, you know, but it's not exciting, you know.
Yeah. I guess if you think they are going to get a quarterback upgrade, like a Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, then maybe, or even a Kirk Cousins, which kind of feels weird, Cousins in a Steelers uniform, but it's possible. Then I guess that's, you know, buy him now because he might get a bump from that. Yeah. So
somebody in my my orphaned dynasty league that I'm like rebuilding, they wanted my second round pick, which is the 203, and they were going to give me the last pick in the third round and Deontay Johnson for that. And I was like, nah, like I'm not doing that. I'm not moving back 21 spots or 23 spots in the draft, like especially those 23 spots for Deontay Johnson. It's not only because I have like good younger receivers, but also it's like I just don't think he's worth that necessarily.
Yeah. No, it's fair. Pickens is another interesting one because I've never been a big George Pickens guy. I recognize he had a really good year, and I think I even said before last year his play style. Would I be surprised if he had like a good year like a Devontae Parker? You know, this guy who makes amazing catches and highlight reel catches. You know, would I be surprised if he had 1,200 yards in a year? No. And he did that this year. Now, can he keep it up is the big question. He averaged 18.1 yards per reception, which would led the NFL. And I actually looked this up about receivers averaging, because usually you get receivers like that and they're just like strictly deep threats and, you know, they get like 700-800 yards or something. Like how many receivers have done that? 18 yards per reception and 1,000 yards. And I think since 2000, there was like 30 receivers. But there was very few, maybe it was less than that, but there was very few that did it multiple times. Vincent Jackson was the big one, the guy who played for like the Chargers and the Bucks in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. He did it like 4 years in a row, but it's very rare for a receiver to consistently put up, you know, 18 yards a catch and 1,000-yard seasons. But he could also just not average 18 yards a catch. So I don't know I don't know where I'm at with George Pickens, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm curious to see where you are just real quick. He was the wide receiver 26, despite having 1,100 yards and all that. He was wide receiver 26, playing every game. So where are you at with George Pickens?
Yeah, not excited at all. Like, I'm looking at like some of these other guys that are below him. It's like, you know, it's older guys. Like I'd rather have Christian Kirk than Pickens. Like Diggs, Adams, Evans. I'm kind of there. Like, I'd rather Devontae Adams, that is. I don't know if there is another Adams, but I felt like I had to specify that. I'd rather have those guys. Like, I think those guys have more value. So if you could trade, Pickens like to like a team that's rebuilding for one of those guys. I mean, I think you said this, like, I don't remember what video it was, but I think he's one of those guys is I'll take any first round pick for George Pickens.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which is kind of where he's valued at, like, according to Keep Trade Cut. Like, people are somewhat excited. Like, I see him as a mid 26 first, which I don't know how the hell we've already gone over that. I won't rehash it, but you can't put mid for 2 years in the future. It's like a 25, a 26 first rounder, basically the last pick in this year's draft. It's like, I'll take any of those and just kind of just start it over again.
Yeah, it just feels like with his play style, again, if he is going to play this way, which is kind of what we see in the first 2 years, over 15 yards per reception. His rookie year, he's not going to have a lot of catches, 63 this year. There's not a lot. He's going to need some heavy touchdowns. He's going to be pretty much capped at like a top 20 wide receiver, like in wide receiver 15 to 20, in my opinion. Like if he even has a few more touchdowns is what I'm saying. And just a couple things to note here. He had one game of almost 200 yards. That was like 18% of his yards right there. In that game, in terms of his fantasy production, it was a 33.5 point game. That was almost 20% of his fantasy points in that one game. He had 10 games in half PPR under double-digit points, which is not what you want. There's a couple in there like 8.7, 9.5. Those aren't killing you, but you want double-digit points from your wide receiver too, more often than not 10 games under. So, yeah, he's a tough one because I think there's a big crowd of people who are really high on him and a crowd of people who are really low on him. So
there's definitely someone in your league that you can trade him to. Because like you said, there are a ton of people that are excited, and I am not one of those though. Like I think you nailed it right there with, it's just too many games, like, basically like 6 points and below kind of a thing. Where it's just like, man, like, he's just younger, worse Gabe Davis without a quarterback, like,
yeah, maybe he's better than Gabe Davis, but his situation's not as good, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's fair enough. Like, yeah, like you said, like the highlight reels and stuff, the guy has talent for sure. It's like, it's not even a bird on the player, but we're just talking about straight up, like, where's he at perceived by the community. And I think he's definitely a guy that you could probably get some decent returns on him. Like would he be worth 2 second-round picks or not really? Let's see, 8 second.
Yeah, we're probably going to get someone commenting on this that we're dumb, because there are people that really like George Pickens. I know.
Sure. Yeah. So basically 2 late seconds you can trade for George Pickens, and I'm totally fine with that, like, because you probably got him kind of in the middle of the second. So a couple of years ago, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we are dumb, and I'm totally fine eating crow on this if I turn out to be wrong, because I just am not excited. I think we've laid it out pretty well. So
yeah, for sure. It really does feel like a Devontae Parker kind of esque outlier season. I know Devontae Parker, he did that in his 5th season, not his 2nd. So there's that difference I should mention. But yeah, Allen Robinson, nothing to talk about there. Calvin Austin, I kind of liked him coming out of college, but we have 2 years of nothing now, so he's a drop at this point. 2 years, yeah, he missed all of 2022. Yeah, no one else to talk about in the wide receiver position, in my opinion. The tight end, Pat Freiermuth, I actually, he was a guy that I hated in redraft because he was being drafted in like the 6th, 7th round. I was like, this dude is not a difference maker at all, But
well, I don't know if he was being drafted to be a difference maker. He was basically drafted by people who were kind of like, well, I need to get a tight end finally, and all the good ones are gone, kind of like, because we have, the previous year he was definitely like a startable dude, like in our minds, like based on his 2022 performance. But yeah, I already know what you're gonna say about him, so just say it.
No, again, he's just one of those tight ends. Like, if someone really likes him and they're willing to pay up for him and give me a Chiga Conquo, or if you like Greg Dulcich, sure, or one of these guys, Tyler Higbee. Again, I won a tight end premium dynasty league with Tyler Higbee starting every single week. So yeah, it's just where I'm at. But I will say this: Freiermuth, Arthur Smith, generally, tight ends tend to do pretty well. Like, you go back to Tennessee, you think of like Jonnu Smith. He's a tight ends coach. That's where he comes up from. He started with I don't know if he started with tight ends, but he was a tight ends guy there for a few years with Tennessee. Arthur Smith, that is. And Jonnu Smith had a couple one or two good years with him in Tennessee. Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards.
I was going to say Jonnu Smith had a good games last year with Arthur Smith.
Exactly, yeah. And then last year, if you combine Pitts and Jonnu, they were really damn good. So, that it plays into his offense quite a lot. So, I'm more excited about Freiermuth than I was, a week ago. So, but again, it's one of those. If he's my starting tight end, if I can move down from him, like if I can move down from, again, someone loves Jake Ferguson and they want to give me Pat Freiermuth and even a 3rd round pick for him, I'll take it. I'll definitely do that. So, and then vice versa, if someone loves Freiermuth, I'll move down and pick up something. I'm also fine with him as a starter. He's just one of those, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 7 tight end. So go ahead. You can talk on Freiermuth.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. Like, he's kind of one of those guys, like, we thought he was going to be a little more special than what we saw this year, which isn't exactly fair because there was injuries and everything like that. But, I mean, he did have that one big game where probably nobody started him, But I think since it was against Cincinnati, and I think they were really bad against tight ends. So maybe someone streamed him that week and got lucky. But yeah, I don't think like there's not a whole lot to talk about. I think he's fine on a buy low. Like, if you're giving up like a high 3rd round pick or something like that, which is, I think he's actually valued a little bit more than that. Like, I'm fine with it if you really need a tight end, but I don't think he's gonna be the special guy that he kind of seemed like we might have. Like we definitely saw like good flashes with him, and he's a good like real life player for sure. Mm-hmm. But I just don't know. Like, I'm kind of intrigued by him to some extent, but probably not like to the point where I'm gonna call him a buy or anything like that. Like, I think he's like, they're actually valuing him a little bit more than a late 2nd. Which is, I don't know. Like,
I don't think I would do that.
Nah, I wouldn't do that. I'd rather just have the pick. Yeah, I don't think there's too much more to talk about. But yeah, we could. The Steelers, they do seem like a team where it's like, damn, we could easily be wrong on these, but it's just kind of like what we've seen, and there's no reason to be excited unless you live in Pennsylvania, I guess. So I don't know. I think we talked enough about them to kind of get what our opinion is out there.
Yeah, for sure. And again, if they get a quarterback, that changes a lot. So we'll see what they do there. Darnell Washington, I think it was a 3rd round pick. He's basically an offensive tackle. He's just a massive dude. So I don't think he's ever going to turn into anything fantasy relevant. So that's it. That is it with the Steelers. Fun to talk about, I guess. We get the Dolphins next, so that's fun. Any last words on the Steelers?
No, I will argue that I don't think that was very fun to talk about, but That's fine.
No, I know. I don't know. I am a little bit more optimistic about some of the players with Arthur Smith, so which
Yeah.
is kind of funny.
Call us dumb in the comments if you disagree.
Yeah, right. And let us know if you disagree. But if you don't, you can like and subscribe. So we will catch you guys next time talking about the Miami Dolphins.